When the HOA president tried to kick me out of my neighborhood, she didn't realize one thing. I wasn't just another homeowner. I was the law. Watch how I dismantle her entire operation, and let me know where you're tuning in from. The sun had barely begun its slow crawl over the sleepy town of Willowbrook when my tires crunched against the asphalt of Elmwood Drive. The street I had called home before duty had pulled me away. But something was wrong. The pristine houses, the well-manicured lawns, and the forced uniformity of this HOA-governed neighborhood all looked the same, except for one thing: my house. My house, the one I had grown up in, had been marked. A bright orange violation notice was plastered across my front door like a warning, an omen screaming at me before I had even parked my car. I stepped out, my uniform still crisp from my morning meeting at the precinct, the weight of my new badge heavy in my pocket as I ripped the notice from the door. My eyes scanned the absurd list of infractions: unapproved exterior color, unauthorized flagpole, excessive vehicle presence. The last one made my jaw tighten. I knew exactly who was behind this: Karen Whitmore, HOA president, self-appointed queen of the neighborhood. The woman who once tried to fine my mother for planting flowers that weren't on the HOA's approved list. My knuckles whitened as I gripped the paper. It was signed with her infamous swirling signature, a name that had haunted this neighborhood for years. My front door creaked as I stepped inside, dust particles dancing in the morning light. I had only been gone for 6 months. 6 months of intense police training before being sworn in last week as the new chief of police. The thought made me chuckle darkly. Karen had no idea who she had just pissed off. A sharp knock at my door made my shoulders stiffen. I didn't even need to look. I knew that knock. Controlled. Precise. Overconfident. I swung the door open and there she stood, Karen Whitmore in all her authoritarian glory. Clipboard clutched against her chest, her blonde bob styled to ruthless perfection. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice syrupy with condescension. "I wasn't expecting you back so soon." Her eyes flicked down at the uniform I hadn't changed out of yet, but she masked the confusion with a tight-lipped smile. "And yet here I am," I said coolly, folding my arms across my chest. "Want to explain this?" I held up the violation notice. Karen's eyes gleamed as she tapped her clipboard with a perfectly manicured nail. "Of course. As you're well aware, our neighborhood thrives on uniformity and order. Your home has fallen out of compliance." My lips twitched, but I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of knowing she'd gotten under my skin. "Out of compliance?" I echoed. "I've been gone for 6 months. Nothing has changed." "Oh, but it has," she countered, flipping through her paperwork with exaggerated flair. "A new policy was enacted in your absence. Every home must adhere to the updated aesthetic guidelines. Your exterior color is a shade too dark. And that flagpole," she scoffed, "it's simply disruptive." My jaw ticked. I had installed that flagpole in honor of my late father, a veteran who had spent his life serving this town. "Disruptive," I repeated, voice low. "Karen, that flagpole's been there for 15 years. She gave a practiced shrug. "Rules are rules." I took a slow breath through my nose, reining in the frustration bubbling beneath my skin. I had dealt with criminals, gang leaders, and bureaucratic red tape, but somehow Karen Whitmore was shaping up to be the worst of them all. "You're right," I said smoothly, tucking the notice into my pocket. "Rules are rules." Her triumphant smirk was short-lived. "Which is why I'd hate to remind you that I'm the law." I pulled out my badge and watched with satisfaction as her expression faltered for the first time. She blinked, her clipboard lowering slightly as realization dawned on her. The gears in her brain turned rapidly, trying to process this new development. "You're..." Her voice trailed off as the color drained from her face. I stepped forward, dropping my voice just for her. "I'm the new chief of police, Karen." The silence between us stretched thick with unspoken battles. Her grip tightened on the clipboard. I see. Good." I gave her my best wolfish grin. "Now if you'll excuse me, I have some more pressing matters to deal with, like ensuring that this HOA isn't overstepping legal boundaries." Karen swallowed hard, but she wasn't one to back down so easily. She straightened her shoulders, plastering on her usual saccharine smile. "I hope you understand, Chief Carter, that my priority is always the betterment of our community. And I hope you understand," I countered, stepping back into my house, That my priority is justice. I shut the door before she could say another word, exhaling slowly as I leaned against the wood. This was only the beginning. Karen had made a crucial mistake, one she would soon regret, because the rules had just changed, and this time I was the one enforcing them. Shaky. He looked past me like he was already imagining himself in handcuffs. Then finally he deflated. What kind of deal? I smiled. Start talking and we'll discuss it. 2 weeks later, Richard Gale resigned in disgrace. The city council launched a full investigation. Developers who had been in bed with Karen and Gale suddenly found themselves under federal scrutiny. The HOA officially disbanded. The money Karen had stolen was traced back, and a class action lawsuit was filed on behalf of every homeowner she had extorted. And Karen? She sat in county jail, awaiting trial, screaming about how this was all a misunderstanding. I made a point to visit her once just to see it for myself. She sat across from me, hollow-eyed, furious. You think you've won? She spat. I just smiled. No, Karen. I know I have. The neighborhood changed after that. People started painting their houses however they wanted. Flags went up. Driveways filled with cars. For the first time in years, people weren't afraid of ridiculous fines or HOA board threats. And me? I finally sat on my porch with a beer, watching the sunset, knowing that Karen's reign was over for good. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. Karen was sitting in county lockup. Richard Gale had been forced to resign in disgrace. The HOA was officially dissolved. The neighborhood was finally free. For the first time in years, people repainted their homes without fear. Driveways filled up without citations. Porch lights stayed on past HOA-mandated curfews. But Karen had spent years building her kingdom. And people like her? They don't go down without a fight. It started small. Anonymous emails to my office, claiming I had abused my power to dismantle the HOA. Fake complaints filed against me at City Hall, all mysteriously and signed. A local news outlet ran a suspiciously biased opinion piece, calling me a rogue officer who had terrorized a well-meaning community leader. Then one night someone tried to break into my house. I woke to the sound of glass shattering. My instincts kicked in before my mind fully caught up. I grabbed my gun from the nightstand and moved. Fast, silent, clearing each room in my house with methodical precision. The back door was wide open. I swept the yard, heart pounding, adrenaline sharp in my veins. Nothing. Whoever it was, they were gone. But they left something behind. A single envelope taped to my porch railing. Inside was a printed note. No handwriting. Just bold, impersonal words on white paper. You think you won. You didn't. Asterisk, asterisk. I stared at it, my grip tightening. This wasn't just some disgruntled HOA supporter upset about losing their precious rules. This was a warning. And I had a damn good idea who was behind it. A soft shuffle near the front door. Then a shadow moved. I exhaled, slow, steady. Then I saw it, the glint of metal. A gun. Whoever was here wasn't here to scare me. They were here to end this. I acted on instinct. I moved first, a quick, sharp pivot, gun raised. And the moment I did, the glass shattered. A bullet whizzed past my head. I dropped low, rolling into the hallway as another shot tore through the drywall. Plaster rained down. Then silence. They weren't running. They were waiting. I took a slow breath, counted to 3. Then I moved one step forward. Then I fired. The bullet hit the wall just inches from my target, but it was enough to make them shift, just enough for me to see them. A man dressed in black. No insignia, no markings. Just a professional sent to do one thing. And I wasn't about to let that happen. I lunged, tackling him hard. The impact knocking us both into the living room. He grunted, struggling, but I had the upper hand. I drove my elbow into his ribs. Asterisk, asterisk, once, twice, asterisk, asterisk, until he finally buckled. I wrenched the gun from his hand, shoving him onto his back. My own gun was at his temple before he could even react. His breathing was ragged, but his eyes weren't afraid. Because he knew something. Something I didn't. I pressed the barrel harder against his skull. Who sent you? Nothing. Who the hell are you working for? A slow, thin smile spread across his lips. You already know, Chief. My stomach twisted. I don't think I do, I said. But I can find out. His smirk widened. "No," he said softly. Then his hand moved too fast. A flick of the wrist. A small silver object fell to the floor. A detonator. I barely had time to throw myself back before the charge went off. A deafening boom ripped through the house. Smoke. Splintered wood. The floor shook beneath me. I coughed, disoriented, ears ringing. Through the haze I saw movement, the man stumbling toward the door. I reached for my gun, blinking against the dust. But by the time I could see straight, he was gone. Vanished. Like he had never been there at all.